welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. My name is Urvi, and in today's video I'm going to give you guys some very useful travel tips for Costa Rica. So if you're planning a trip to Costa Rica, you should definitely stick around till the end of this video. And if you haven't watched my vlogs, I will link them up here and also down in the description box, so go watch them. Planning your itinerary to Costa Rica can be super overwhelming, I know, because I did that and I was also traveling solo. In this video, I'm going to talk about everything from entry requirements, visa requirements, the best places to visit in Costa Rica, the places I visited and the activities I did, and also answering an important question for solo female travelers: is it safe? Let's start with the current travel requirements. I was there in late July, early August, but some things have changed since when I went to Costa Rica at the end of July. Everyone, regardless of vaccination status, had to get the travel insurance approved by the Costa Rican government. They list about 3 on their website, so I had to get one too. I will link in the description box the one that I got. It was also the cheapest one of the 3. But since August, the requirements have changed. Now all the passengers that are fully vaccinated do not need to buy the travel health insurance. You do need to submit proof of vaccination status. If you're not vaccinated, you still need to get the travel health insurance, so make sure you do that, because when you get to the airport right before immigration, they do check if you have the insurance or not. You also need to fill out something called the health pass, which is available on the Costa Rican travel website. I will also link it down in the description box, but everyone has to fill this out. If you are vaccinated, you need to attach your proof of vaccination along with this health pass. Make sure you fill this out like 24 to 48 hours prior to travel. Once you fill this health pass, you get a QR code, and they do check this at the airport. Visas. Now, do you need a visa to travel to Costa Rica? That depends on what passport you have, what country you're from. But if you're a US citizen or have a US green card, or you have a US visa, you do not need to get an additional visa for Costa Rica. Your US visa should be good, but they also have a tool on their website that helps you identify if you need a visa. So if you're not sure, I would look into that before going. Of course, make sure you are meeting all the visa requirements. I really want to make this video as useful for you guys as possible, so I will link that in the description box as well. Now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about actually getting to Costa Rica. The Costa Rican currency is called colones in Spanish and colon in English. A lot of the places in Costa Rica will accept credit cards or your traveler's checks or US dollars, but my tip would be to definitely get some local currency. You don't have to worry about getting this from your country. You can always exchange it once you're in Costa Rica. But, and this is super important, do not exchange your currency at the airport. The exchange rate was about 530 colones for $1, which is almost 100 colones less than the actual exchange rate. And granted that you're not going to get the exact exchange rate from anywhere, but at the airport it's definitely a lot lower, and it's surprising. I saw so many people exchanging their money at the airport, but as soon as I got to the hotel I was staying at in San Jose, they were giving me 610 colones for $1, so that's already a huge difference. So just don't exchange your currency at the airport. That said, I would highly recommend bringing the US dollars with you, or whatever country you're from, bring your currency in cash, because when you try to use the ATM to get cash there, of course there's international transaction fees. There's also a separate ATM fee, and you want to avoid paying all of that. For me, the transaction fees was about $7 when I tried to withdraw some money from the ATM, so make sure you're bringing enough cash on you if you want to avoid paying that fee. A useful app to download before your trip to Costa Rica is the XE app. This is a currency conversion app, so what I use it for is to just check the current exchange rate, and you can compare this to wherever you're exchanging your money from, so you know you're not being completely ripped off. The best rate I got at the time was 613 colones for $1. I think the official conversion rate was 624, so I would say that is pretty close. And that brings me to my next tip: be diligent about counting your money in Costa Rica. I had this situation 3 different times while I was there where the person on the other side gave me less money than they were supposed to, and I only knew that because I was counting the money. So one time when I tried to exchange currency, she gave me about 100 colonias less than she was supposed to give me because it was all in like coins, so it was a lot to count. So I think she thought I wouldn't count. And the other instance was that I was trying to buy a ticket to a hike and she gave me $3 less than she should have. I don't know if that's on purpose. I'm not gonna say that it isn't because I don't know for sure, but just make sure you're being diligent, counting your money, and not getting ripped off. Do you need to know Spanish to travel to Costa Rica? Absolutely not. I have found that in most places, they somewhat understand English. In San Jose, there was absolutely no problem. Everyone spoke English. But in the smaller towns in Costa Rica, it was a little bit harder to get by. And you can always use Google Translate. You just type in whatever you want to say in Google and say Spanish translation and it comes up. And they're very easily able to understand that. So if you don't speak Spanish and you run into a situation where the other person does not speak English or doesn't understand English, you can always use Google Translate. And that brings me to the question that I had before I went to Costa Rica, whether or not I would have internet service or Wi-Fi there. Of course, at all the hotels there's Wi-Fi, at some restaurants there is Wi-Fi, but I found on my network, I use the T-Mobile network, I did have internet service in most major parts of town. It was a little bit slower, and in the smaller towns it was a little bit harder to get, but at the hotel there was always Wi-Fi, so it wasn't a huge issue. So I would definitely check with your provider, but in case you don't have data service, you can always buy these prepaid SIM cards at small stores or like these phone stores in Costa Rica, and they're not too expensive, so that's a good option. Let's talk about the weather in Costa Rica and what you should definitely pack. So Costa Rica has 2 seasons. The wet season is between May through November, and the dry season is between December through April. But Costa Rica is covered in rainforests, so expect rain on your travels. You're mostly gonna be hiking in rainforests. You're gonna be doing all of these activities. On most days in areas like La Fortuna, Monteverde, it is going to be very misty, very foggy, very rainy, sometimes with low visibility. But that's just how Costa Rica is. It's part of Costa Rica's beauty. That's why I would be prepared for rainy days. Bring whatever you need to bring. Definitely bring a rain jacket for your hikes. Waterproof covers for your bags, your camera equipment if you have any. And because you're gonna be hiking and doing a lot of outdoorsy stuff, I would also carry mosquito repellent, insect repellent, and of course bring sunscreen. Chances are you're definitely gonna be on a beachy part of Costa Rica at some point in your trip, and honestly the UV index in Costa Rica is so high. I literally tanned in 10 minutes when I was on the beach there. So bring a lot of sunscreen and reapply it. I ran out of sunscreen and I had to buy it from the local department store there, and it is about 30 to 40% more expensive than it would be in the US. So if you're bringing a carry-on, you may not be able to do this, but if you're bringing a check-in bag, definitely carry lots of sunscreen. Okay, let's talk about food. So Costa Rican food has a lot of Spanish, Caribbean influence. If you're vegetarian or vegan like me, you do not need to worry. Costa Rica has plenty of vegan, vegetarian food options. Vegetarian more easily than vegan. You're obviously not gonna have as many choices compared to meat because that is definitely heavily focused on in Costa Rican food, but you're not gonna be hungry for sure. There's a lot of food like acai bowls, sandwiches, gallo pinto, which is a traditional Costa Rican dish. It is literally rice and beans. So even if you wanted to eat authentic Costa Rican food, there's definitely a few vegetarian options. And I cannot talk about Costa Rican food without mentioning the sodas. Sodas are basically these local mom and pop Costa Rican authentic restaurants. They serve traditional Costa Rican food. I usually went to the sodas for lunch. The lunch is called casado, and I always got the vegetarian casado. It is like a huge plate filled with like 6 different things, and it only costs $3 to $4, which is insane for that amount of food, and it is so flavorful. It's also a great option if you're on a budget but still want a pretty fulfilling meal. Now, talking about budget, you can definitely travel Costa Rica on a budget. or you can go all out and like pay for expensive restaurants, expensive resorts, all of that. But I would definitely budget a little bit more than you think you would need. Costa Rica is not as cheap as you think it would be. It's definitely not comparable to say Mexico or Dominican Republic. The food costs slightly more. If your accommodation is hotels or Airbnbs, they cost a little bit more than you think they would. There's also so many activities to do, and these really do add up. So make sure you are accounting for all of that. But that being said, Costa Rica can definitely be done on a budget. So many people who work remotely, who are digital nomads, live there because of the fact that they can live cheap in Costa Rica. So if you're looking to do it on a budget, then there are cheaper hostel accommodations where you can either get your own room for a little bit higher, but you can also get a dorm bed and share your room with say 3 or 4 others, and it would be significantly cheaper. And with the food, of course, there are cheap options. There are sodas. There are also restaurants where you can have a full meal for $7 to $8. So it is definitely doable on a budget, especially if you're a solo traveler. Let's talk about transportation. We're in Costa Rica. A lot of the towns in Costa Rica that people go to are really far from each other, about a 3 to 4, sometimes 5-hour drive. And so a lot of people doing like longer trips in Costa Rica do rent a car because, you know, you spend like 2 days in one town and then you want to go to the next one. And Costa Rica is huge, so there's a lot to see. But personally, I did not do that. I used a couple different modes of transportation. So first off, from the airport to my hotel in San Jose, I did use the Uber app. Now, when I got out of the airport and asked the regular cab drivers, they told me that Uber was illegal in Costa Rica, which I thought they were just saying to get me to take a cab. But I actually looked it up, and there are some issues with Uber in Costa Rica. I don't fully know if it's illegal or legal, but I know that a lot of travelers, or I would say most of the travelers, do tend to take Ubers. Now, they're not available everywhere. I didn't find Ubers sometimes in the smaller towns, but in San Jose there were always Ubers, and my cab from the airport to my hotel was significantly cheaper. I think it was about $15 to $16 for me, compared to it would have been like 30 to 35 on the regular taxi there. So I would definitely recommend using Uber. And one thing to know is that the drivers will ask you to sit up front with them. I think this is because of some kind of laws, again, with Uber not being fully legal in Costa Rica. But I thought it was kind of strange, so you should definitely expect to be asked to sit in front always. Another taxi app that I used, which I found on my own, was the Didi app. Download this before you go to Costa Rica, set it up. Something came up for me last minute and I had to go from San Jose to La Fortuna, and I didn't have the time to figure out another mode of transportation, so I just used the Didi app, and it cost me about $48 to $50, which for a town that was 3 hours away is insane. Sometimes there are no cabs available on this app, but if you get lucky, and also in the bigger towns, you can definitely check this app out too. It's cheaper than the Uber as well. If you're a solo traveler and are not driving, but you still want to go from place to place in Costa Rica, there is the Interbus shuttle that you can use. I think every shuttle ride on the Interbus costs about $50 to $60 for one way. They pick you up at your hotel, drop you off at the exact drop-off point that you give them. And I ended up using the Interbus shuttle to go from Jaco to San Jose and from La Fortuna to Jaco. So if you're not in a bigger town like San Jose, then you probably should not rely on last-minute Ubers, because I had some trouble with that. Just book your shuttle. It needs to be done 1 day in advance at least, so make sure you're doing that. But that's a really good way to get around if you don't want to drive. Places to visit in Costa Rica. I cannot even begin to cover. There are so many different types of places in Costa Rica. If you're looking for hiking, zip lining, a lot of like volcano activities, all of that, you should check out La Fortuna, Monteverde, all of those areas. But if you're looking for a more laid back, beachy kind of vacation, then Puerto Viejo is amazing. I didn't go there, but I hear people put that on top of their list for Costa Rica. Puerto Viejo has a Caribbean influence. There's a lot of solo travelers there. If you're looking for a surfing vacation, then Santa Teresa is amazing, I've heard. covered. Again, all of these places I haven't been to, so I will talk more in detail about the places that I did go to. I tried not to move around too much because I was traveling solo, but I spent a day in San Jose walking around exploring San Jose. This really gave me like a good sense of Costa Rican culture because I took the walking tour and visited the market, tried different local food, local fruits. So this really started me off on the right foot for my trip. And then I spent a considerable amount of time in La Fortuna, did a lot of activities here. I did zip lining, river rafting, hiked a bunch of trails. I would say like a different trail almost every other day. There is the Arenal volcano there, which is awesome. I went to Rio Celeste, which is the blue waterfall, which I think is one of the most magical things I've ever seen. The last part of my trip, I was confused between Manuel Antonio and Jaco. I chose Jaco because it was closer to the airport and I had to leave on an early flight on a Saturday morning, but I would definitely recommend not to do what I did and go to Manuel Antonio because the beaches are beautiful there, the wildlife is amazing, and I cannot talk about Costa Rica without talking about the biodiversity there. Costa Rica has about 5% of the world's population in wildlife. So if you're looking for a vacation where you spot lots of animals, then this is the perfect trip for you. So your itinerary would totally depend on the kind of activities you want to do. If you want to spot a lot of wildlife, I would totally recommend Monteverde, Manuel Antonio, those other places where my friends saw the most wildlife and had a lot of fun doing that. And lastly, answering the big question for solo travelers, solo female travelers in particular, is it safe to visit Costa Rica alone? Absolutely. I had nothing but great experiences almost everywhere. In La Fortuna, which was my favorite part of the trip, I met a lot of people, I made friends, I went on a couple hike with friends. I was also staying at a hostel for one part of my La Fortuna trip, which made it helpful to meet other people who were also traveling solo. In Jaco, I didn't feel as safe alone as a female, so I don't recommend going there, but if you're with a group of friends, Jaco could be a lot of fun because there's nightlife, there's a lot of restaurants, there's the beach. But generally, I would recommend just being diligent throughout your trip, as you would be anywhere else, not just in Costa Rica if you were traveling solo. Make sure you do not leave your belongings at the beach when you're going in the water. Make sure you're always like paying attention. Count your money. I would advise against dressing too flashy or attracting too much attention. Just be diligent and respectful, and I think you should be totally okay. Costa Rica was a beautiful trip for me. It was my first solo trip and it has only opened up my mind to doing more solo trips. And that brings me to the end of this video. If you made it this far, leave Pura Vida in the comments down below so I know the real ones. And thank you so much for watching. Safe travels. I will see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.